I'm 29 years old now, and I feel like I've done nothing, that I'm still doing nothing, and that I'm going nowhere.
6 years ago, I stopped making YouTube videos regularly. I wanted to go out and make things in real life, poetry and theatre and short films, but not just about anything. As I joined the boom of Extinction Rebellion, I found myself drawn to writing about environmental issues. And it went well for a while. I did a few eco-themed projects and had more lined up as a freelance poet/theatre maker, but that all got squashed by the pandemic. But even before the coronavirus, I realised there was an issue with my goal of make eco-theatre. I didn't know much about environmental issues. So I decided to move to Sweden to study a master's in environmental history. The plan was to study the 2-year programme, then come back to London and make theatre about environmental issues and hopefully change the world a little bit. That's not quite what happened. I moved to Sweden 4.5 years ago. I'm still here. My master's ended up taking me 3 years because I took a job at the university and I took my study rate down. And I've just sort of ended up sticking around afterwards. The 3 years where I was studying my master's and working at the university were probably the most fulfilled I've ever felt in my life. I learned so much and so deeply that it's changed my perspective on humanity and nature irrevocably. And what I also learned, I think I have the power to pass that on. For example, I was talking to a fellow climate activist about how I felt like activism hadn't really achieved that much. And she admitted to me we'd been campaigning to save a forest together. And the way that I'd spoken about the forest that day had made her really understand why climate activism is important. She actually changed her direction of education, partly because of what I said on that day about the forest. Yeah, I mean, what an honour to have changed someone's world in that way. But it was at my job where I really learned the power of changing small worlds. I was working at the university as a course coordinator at a student-led department for environmental and development studies. And that meant that I designed and delivered courses on sustainability for fellow students. I did 3 courses, one of them twice. I led a course on eco-psychology and art, sustainable futures and sustainable project management. And sometimes I taught things myself, but mostly I was responsible for inviting guest lecturers and practitioners from around the world. And then also my pride and joy was I founded an eco-art club where people could creatively explore their climate emotions. The outcomes of that were, to this day, just, they give me shivers. They were so beautiful. So through all of that amazing, educational, collaborative work, I saw how people can change their perspectives and even their lifestyles, and also build small-scale grassroots projects that can do something really important in the local area. That's where the work is. It's changing small worlds. You can't change the whole world, of course you can, but you can change small worlds where you are, people and places. But nothing lasts forever. The job that I had at the university was only for students. So once I graduated and finished the course that I was already doing, I had to stop. Which leads us up to about spring 2024, and I'm applying for PhDs. But that wasn't part of the plan. My original ideas when I came to Sweden for eco-theatre and poetry had just completely disappeared. I was just in a different world now. After writing a 60-credit thesis and being part of the academic world with my job, I was in the world of academia, and on the recommendation of my program coordinator, I thought I should continue that. And I wanted to do PhD research on eco-spiritualities, looking at how much and if eco-spiritualities encourage people to live sustainably and actually take long-term climate action. So I thought that was important for understanding why and how people are motivated to actually change their lifestyles and do good work on the long term. But whilst writing these applications, another idea came into my head. What if I went to music school instead? You see, another really huge part of my life here in Sweden has been music, and more specifically my choir. I joined my choir when I first moved here, and they have just been a lifeline of community ever since. They have made me a better musician, and yeah, I love them to like a cultish degree, but that's okay because we all say that we're in a cult. And you know, when I reflect on it, at university I sort of fell into poetry and theatre, but music is the thing that has been a constant in my life ever since I was really little. It's the thing that I always come back to. And not only that, I had quite recently been shown the potential of music for change. I've sort of dropped out of doing environmental activism in the last few years, but the one thing I have done is sing original songs at protests. And I saw how they comforted people and moved people, and it felt like something I could do that felt sustainable for me as well as being effective. And not just that, even in my thesis, my master's thesis, I wrote about how sound is vital for making us care about our local environment. So it's not just that I think or believe that music has the potential to kind of change the world a little bit. I know it can.
I've been studying music production and songwriting in Stockholm since September. In the end, I didn't have to make the choice between academia and music because I didn't get a research assistant job, didn't even get an interview for a PhD, let alone an offer. But I did get into music school. So I'm there and I'm finally writing and recording music like I have dreamed on and off for my whole life. Like, I wanted to be a pop star at 4 years old. But the problem is, I'm still not entirely happy, or maybe the word's more uncomfortable. I feel almost kind of itchy, like I'm still kind of doing the wrong thing. And maybe that's because at 4 years old I also wanted to be a vet or a zoologist. To be honest, I'm 29 years old now, and I feel like I've done nothing. That I'm still doing nothing, and that I'm going nowhere. And I know that sounds contradictory when I've just been talking about all of these like small worlds that I've changed, and I am very proud of all of my achievements. I think it's maybe partly to do with how much I have changed. Jag talar ett helt nytt språk nu. Jag har integrerat i en annan kultur som är ganska olik min hemkultur. Jag har varit här tillräckligt länge att England känner inte riktigt som hem längre. Men i Sverige jag är fortfarande en utlänning, kanske alltid. Detta land känner inte riktigt som hem heller. Similarly, I don't know if I belong in academia or music. I really don't. I adored studying and I got excellent grades. And I just love sharing knowledge with people and having those discussions. But I do have problems with the traditional education system. I can't really see myself in a career in research, like in the long term at least. On the other hand, I've always been told that I have a great voice, singing voice, and that I should sort of do something with it. That makes sense because honestly I never feel happier than when I'm singing. And I love performing and writing songs as well. But the problem there is I hate the music industry. I don't know where I belong. Which country, which career, which self. I used to be so directional and energized. I was also struggling a lot more than I let on, but I was determined. And the problem is that's led to who I am now. Someone who is terrified of burning out. I feel like a failure. Because when I look back over my experience of adulthood so far, I just see a bunch of stunted paths. I've tried to become a musical theatre performer, a literary critic, a YouTuber, a poet, a theatre producer, an environmental activist, a historian, a teacher, a researcher, a singer-songwriter, all whilst bouncing between excelling in academia with a passion for politics and a genuine interest in conservation versus a certain level of natural talent and a passion for music that is, at the end of the day, insatiable. And I get it. Your 20s are meant to be for experimenting, and I am actually very grateful that I've been able to follow so many different opportunities. But now looking back, I wish I had just committed to one path so I could have actually got somewhere. I mean, I've always been committed to wanting to make the world a better place, a more just place. There is a really big question now on how. And I definitely can't keep balancing these two very different worlds and career choices and all the rest of it. It feels like I've really got to just make a choice.
I had been planning to film this section sitting on the lake, but everything has melted. It's been so warm. Like, yeah, the lake is kind of still frozen, but it's only January and everything has melted.
There is a school of thought within environmental humanities that, for the sake of this video, I'm going to call hopeful fatalism. When you look at the science and current politics, it's pretty clear that we're not going to solve the climate crisis, at least in terms of decarbonisation. We would need a near miraculous change of direction from certain global politicians and major corporations and even individuals in rich countries for us to actually keep us anything below like 3 degrees of warming. We are looking at the end of the world as we know it. But that's the key point. The end of the world as we know it. The planet is not going to go pfft, but the world that we currently know and love, that is going to end. Now, the hopeful fatalists, I'm thinking of people like Dougald Hine, Bayo Akomolafe, and the American death guy. I think his name is Stephen Jenkinson. And essentially the argument goes, trying to fight against this reality that we're at the end of our world is only going to leave us burnt out. Literally. If we hold on to this vision where there's like an end point to the climate crisis, where we're going to reach net zero and this environmental problem is just a thing of the past and we've fixed it, we're going to fail because we are not going to reach that point. Rather than trying to obsessively maintain the systems and paradigms that we have today, we should instead focus on adapting and becoming resilient and perhaps even flourishing in this new unknown world that is going to rise. A bit like a phoenix from the ashes. Dougald Hine calls it working in the ruins. And to be clear, this doesn't mean in any way that we should give up trying to protect the environment and trying to decarbonise, not at all. We do need to sort of adjust the goalpost by focusing on the ball instead, because we don't exactly know where the ball's going to end up and we don't know how to get it there. So, you know, rather than putting all of our focus on the goal, we need to make sure that we're treating the ball right. I don't play football. I hope that metaphor works. Because sometimes holding on to a goal just because you're scared of looking like you're giving up, or maybe because there's a part of you that wants to be a hero, it just gets you burned. Staying steadfast on a single path, on a single vision, a single way of doing things, it can prevent you from seeing the better alternatives along the way. And this is something I definitely know personally. When I gave up on my decade-long obsession with going into musical theatre, it wasn't the right career path for me. And I'm so thankful now to my 21-year-old self who finally let that long-held dream go. And it was to the fury of my teenage self. I adapted to the reality of the opportunities and desires that I actually had, rather than the opportunities and desires that I thought I should have. On the other hand, I feel like my willingness to adapt, to jump ship every time I think it's sinking, is part of the reason why I'm having such a crisis of confidence now. I am now scared to commit to anything. I'm scared to have goals because what if they change? What if I want something different in a month or a year or 5 years' time? I actually find it quite hard to work on my music at music school because there's a part of me that feels like it's never going to go anywhere anyway, either because of external factors meaning it won't succeed, or I'm just going to give up again. I'm scared to apply for PhDs again because now that I'm out of the academic world, well, what if that was just a sort of temporary craze? There's no point in even starting like a 28-day exercise challenge because I'm not going to complete it. There's no point in reaching out to friends because I'm not going to manage to stay in contact with them on the long term. Is it worth applying for Swedish citizenship? I don't even know if I want to be in this country in 6 months' time. I don't
commit to anything because I'm scared to, and I don't set goals anymore. So actually holding steadfast to your goals is quite important. If you always just adapt, it's very difficult to achieve anything beyond the first few stages. Just like how the climate crisis does need some long-term thinking, clear pathways, and honestly, a little bit of hope that we are still going to sort this out. It's important to hold onto a vision, to shoot for those stars, even if it feels impossible, even if you don't know what those stars exactly look like and you have no idea how you're going to get there. It's important to have something to strive for. I think humans do well when we have something to strive for, and the environment really needs us striving right now. A crisis in climate and a crisis in confidence. If you always adapt, you never find out where the path leads, and you're never really going to achieve anything and find out what you could change or even save. But if you're too married to a goal, you miss the better opportunities on the way, or at least the more realistic ones. So if I want to change the world, if I want to be content with where my life is, what do I do now? I'm currently in the north of Sweden, furthest north I've ever been, Kiruna. It's honestly one of my favourite places in the world. I'm not gonna lie, Kiruna hasn't been my favourite northern place in Sweden. I think there's more beautiful places, but it's just, there's something about here in the winter that it just encourages so much contemplation and reflection. I think it's because the sun doesn't rise. It's permanent sunrise and sunset. It's so beautiful and just sort of prompts you to think a bit more deeply, I think. But today, actually, the sun is going to rise above the horizon for the first time in a month, I believe. And there's something that I've been thinking about. I actually watched an Anna Akana video and it got me thinking about limiting beliefs. And I realised that I believe that I can't or won't follow through with things. That things either won't work out because of like the universe sabotaging me, or self-sabotage. I never get to the end of things. I never manage to complete things. And it's something that's really grown over the last few years, and it's partly because of all of these changes of path. I'm gonna have to put my mittens on. It is minus. It's not minus 20 like the weather forecast says, but it's at least minus 15. Anyway, I understand why, from quite a compassionate place, I've reached this level of like low confidence. Over the last year, I've lost several close friends. I've lost a sense of home and a sense of community that I'd managed to build here in Sweden. I've been unable to get like a decent job. I did get a job and it was awful. You know, I got into music school, but that hasn't been what I imagined exactly, so I've kind of just been left with more uncertainty than ever. I guess whilst I've been up here, I've just realised that that belief that I can't complete things, I can't finish things, it's ruining my life. I want to look out the sunset, look at it with you guys. I realise that I haven't even been doing that thing that I've been talking about. I'm not adapting, I'm just straight up giving up and calling it adaptation, because I've become really scared to commit to anything. If there's something I have learned that's been really fruitful from these last 11 years of adulthood, it's that being a driven, goal and future-oriented teenager and young adult is great. You can do lots of stuff, but it's also not entirely sustainable. I don't actually know how I'm going to finish this video. I've sort of written a little script here, but like, I don't know what I'm saying, because I don't really know where I'm heading either. If there's anything I can be sure of, it's that I just need to commit to stuff. If I want to release music, I really need to get my act together and say I'm going to release music and do it, you know? And if at some point along the line I realise, oh, actually I hate this, well then I won't. But right now, I still think that I do want to do it. So I should do it. Same with applying to the PhDs. I've got a PhD application on. I've been procrastinating writing by writing this video. I think that's the first thing I'm going to say. I'm committing to making this video. And there's a huge part of me that's like, why? You haven't made videos for 6 years. No one's going to watch it. This is completely pointless. But like, oh my God, you can't live like life like that, right? You've got to commit to the process, haven't you? Not the end goal. This is my first step, I think, is to commit to making this video. And it doesn't mean I'm committing to making YouTube videos again. It just means I'm committing to this. Right now, this video that I felt called to make. And look how beautiful it is. I'm going to show you how beautiful it is.